build a brand, spending on awareness is the last thing that you should do. Spending on awareness is something that you should do when your backbone is ready. But strengthening backbone needs time and it needs patience. What I really liked about entrepreneurship, which is true in day one, two, and today, is that in entrepreneurship you have the ability to solve a lot of problems.
What makes your journey even more interesting is that yours is almost like a David versus Goliath story. So, what was your strategy to counter the intense competition, especially sort of early on?
What we have is technology, which large incumbents at this space were definitely lacking. So we doubled down on that. We outspent them on manufacturing. We outspent them on innovation. We outspent them on technology in terms of building up the team.
How do you address when, let's say, I think in your case also, while you guys started with BLDC, there are others who followed suit. Of course, you guys built a strong brand by then. But when competition copies your product, how do you address it from that standpoint then? Hello, everyone. Welcome to Manufacturing Mindset. I am Sarvesh Kanodia, and I'm glad to introduce you Shibam Das, who is the co-founder of Atomberg. Shibam, welcome to our show.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sarvesh, and hi everyone.
Super. So let's start about talking your journey. You come from a small town in Assam. Tell us about the pivotal moments in your early years and how has that shaped your thinking?
Right. Um, so yeah, I think I was born in Guwahati. Spent like until class 4 or 5, I was actually in a small remote area within Assam, in Kathar district. Then I again shifted to Guwahati in class 6. Um, did my schooling there until class 12. Then came to IIT Bombay. The problem was when I was in the remote area till class 5, there was no English medium school. So I had to study in a vernacular medium school, and that is the problem that I faced when I, let's say, first came to Guwahati in class 5. So I had no choice but to continue in a vernacular medium school. So until class 10, I will say that I mean, relatively I was topper, but the competition was not that great, right? So I was doing well in studies, but it is something like Andho mein Kana Raja, something like that until class 10. Um, then my first reality check was when after class 10, you start thinking about 11, 12, etc. I didn't even hear about IIT back then, because the surrounding that you hang out with. And then I realized it was very competitive to even get admission to a private coaching, or let's say to get admission to a good private teacher, etc. But I will say the first pivotal moment was when eventually I got admitted in, let's say, I mean, back in Guwahati it was not very popular to get admitted into, let's say, quota kind of coaching institutes, but more of as private coachings, right? So you have like teacher for physics different, chemistry different, maths different, etc. And I got admission in, let's say, all the best possible teacher I could have managed at that point in time. पर वहाँ पे ये हुआ कि for the first 3 4 months it was very difficult for me to even adjust to the environment, because then you're immediately talking with, let's say, people who did extremely well in their 10th. They're like very fluent with English. I have to think about if they're saying kiss velocity, what does that velocity means in Bengali, then I have to translate it back into English. I was always lacking in terms of responding, etc., right? But within 3 4 months I actually caught up with the speed, right? And then I realized ki, and that I will say the first pivotal moment in my life where I got a little bit of more confidence, saying that ki, okay, I didn't have the opportunity back then before that, but when I got the opportunity, I figured out to make my mark. And then from there, eventually, I got to the first batch and then did well, and etc. etc. Right. Then the second pivotal moment I will say is after class 12th, right? So then you appeared for JE, appeared for back then there was AIEEE for RACs and NITs. So I managed to clear NIT in the first go, but couldn't crack JE. Right? Now again, we are from a very very middle class family. My father expired in class 9, so it is not easy per se to make a decision of saying that I will drop by 1 year and appear for JE and not, let's say, pursue the engineering option that we got. And everyone and we were like joint family structure, right? So everyone, like my uncles and everyone, suggested we should go ahead with, I should at least pursue my the current thing that we got, which was AIEEE. But usme, I was slightly confident if I get an opportunity of studying one more year, maybe I can crack JEE. And my mother stood by it, right? So my family stood by it. Like my mother, my brother, sister, all of them saying that, if you want to pursue, just pursue. Irrespective of the kind of financial crisis that we had at that point in time, the kind of support, if I look at now from a grown up mindset perspective, it's a very bold decision that they took. So my second pivotal moment was this, and I still remember when I took that decision. जो भी आसपास के लोग थे, जो भी families थे, the mindset was कि यार, you have made a wrong decision. We suggested you, but you didn't listen to us. So it's kind of they're waiting for me to fail, and come back and say, okay, I told you so, right? And my mother had to take that bold decision. But I think what we realized once I cleared JE is that then eventually all the family people, they came back and started appreciating, saying that, you have taken a very bold decision, great, and all that, right? And then I realized कि life में कभी भी, when you go, there will always be doubts, and there is no right decision or wrong decision, and not necessarily you will always take the most popular decision in your life. But if you believe something is right, you should just stand by it. And that has a lot of reflections. And I will say in Atomberg journals, we have seen this many, many times, where the popular choice was not to pursue what we pursued. But eventually, when I look in hindsight, then everyone says that, you have done a great job. But that is always in hindsight and not at that point in time. So I think, some of this will definitely have impact on how we are building Atomberg, or etc. Yeah, I think that's about it. And another thing I will say is that when I was in growing up in Guwahati, fortunately my home was just at the foot of that Nilachal Pahar, where the Kamakya temple is very famous for. Um, and the behavior that I picked up at that point in time was that I used to walk a lot. I used to climb hills every day, or almost every day, like 3 4 days a week, and just walk in the jungle, in the hills, right? And that was, and those, what if I look in hindsight now, if I think and reflect on like what I used to think at that point in time, I think and going ahead now, I still follow the same practice. Whenever I'm in doubt, I just keep walking, keep walking, keep walking. And there's been many instances where, I almost broke down mentally or physically, right? And just keep walking. So that one practice that I picked up from my childhood is, uh, to walk whenever you are in doubt. And the pahar tha abhi IIT ka main gate hai, so you can just enter the IIT campus and keep walking. So I still keep doing the practice again and again.
Wow,
Yeah,
this is
that's
super inspiring. And there are so many nuggets that one can, pick up from everything that you said, right? One was, about opportunity itself, right? Like if one didn't have the opportunity to even, let's say, pursue, let's say, a private, coaching education or, appearing for those exams, someone with that same talent wouldn't necessarily go as far, right? And it's one of those things, like I've done a lot of work in education in my past, and that's, something that, we used to talk about and, work on a lot. The second key was, the family point that you mentioned. And again, as someone who's very family values oriented as me, at least, I have a strong belief that, family is like the biggest support pillar you can have. And I think that shows up in your example as well. Right. And just from a founder perspective, what you mentioned is, do what you believe in, because at the end of the day, even if you do it right, then people will be supporting you. If you do it wrong, people will be after you, where it doesn't matter. You are alone in that journey. So you'll have to do what you'll have to do, right? So just do what you believe is right. Very interesting. And it's a good sort of segue to also talk about Atomberg, right? And you mentioned about it. It wasn't what I understand, it wasn't your first venture idea. You tried some experiments before. So what was it about entrepreneurship that made you do so many experiments? And this is also especially helpful because one of the aims that we have with the podcast is for people to take up entrepreneurship more, right? And so tell us about that experience as well of just starting up in the early days.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think Atomberg is, I mean, within Atomberg, if I add, let's say, all the ideas that we tried within Atomberg, outside Atomberg, before Atomberg, with Manoj, without Manoj, I think the appliance idea will probably be eighth or ninth idea. So I have failed 7, 8 times before we actually, if we look from individual perspective, within Atomberg maybe 4 times, without Atomberg maybe 3, 4 times at least, right? And if I, before commenting on, let's say, what really helped me keep pushing on entrepreneurship, or what I really liked about entrepreneurship, it would give you like first instantly how I actually got into entrepreneurship, right? So in a way, as it was a destiny plus I was a bit lucky as well. So it was back in 2008, right, when we actually entered IIT Bombay, and that was the time when entrepreneurship was getting popularity in India. Those are the days of Flipkarts, where the poster boys of the world, startup world, was the Bansals. They're everywhere in the media, and you being a first graduate in college, you really get inspired by what they're doing, right? When I was in first year, there was one more fellow, a fresher student in my batch only, who started his own ed tech company back then, and it became instantly the talk of the campus. So entrepreneurship became cool, right? And so that was one thing that I say was kind of at right timing, or whatever you want to attribute it to, at the right time, luck, etc. But that pushed me to think about, how do I try my luck or try my hands on this overall concept called entrepreneurship. Um, and then in my second year, okay, so what I did is, actually first year, not in second year, first year, I started interacting with, figuring out, who are the like-minded people, right? So you go, and I had like two options. One is to, of course, look around in the IIT campus, or the B is to go back to Guwahati and see who can be potentially like-minded people from there. I did both. So the first idea that I did is actually with my Guwahati friends. And what we did there is that we figured out that in Guwahati, there's called silk, etc., which is very unique to Guwahati. So can we bring that and sell to somewhere? And we did this try. We probably sold to one or two importers from Dubai. Did some business. Realized that eventually I couldn't pursue it because of the full time responsibility in Bombay, and then you have to go back to Guwahati and supply. It's not that easy that I thought. Then my second year, I mean, back then, building a website was itself a business idea. So we actually created a company to develop and create websites. We did for like 2, 3 companies, and then again the third year came, the placement team came, had to drop out. Then in my third year, my best friend started a company in e-commerce, like the Nike of the world at that point in time. So a little bit of ahead of time, but we managed to get 1 crore capital when I was in third year itself, from a builder. Uh, did that for 1.5 year, and I think one decision that I took, which actually helped me a lot in Atomberg, or eventually, and all three of us had the opportunity to take a decision, right? So in when I think about, when I look at hindsight right now, मुझे लगता है कि यार fourth year में जब हम लोग थे, so we had two options, and all three of us got placement, right? So either we continue our placements that we got, or we jump into the idea of, let's say, the starting something like Nika, where we already have a commitment of 1 crore, we did some business, etc. But we knew that the investor was not right for this kind of business. We knew that there's a lot of risk and very high chance that the company will shut down in a year and a half, right? So other two founders, they decided to pursue their career in the placement that they got, and they're doing extremely great in what they chose. And what I thought at that point in time was कि, uh, कि एक साल में हम फेल तो होने ही वाले, देयर इज नो नो एक्सपेक्टेशन ऑन दैट. बट आई वाज कॉन्फिडेंट कि एक बार आप जंप कर जाओगे एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप में, तो फिर आप जंप कर जाओगे. I just thought, it's time to take that call. Ki I'm not taking a jump because I want to, build on that idea. I know the idea will change, but maybe I will learn entrepreneurship. So I took that decision in the fourth year. So this is how I got into the about entrepreneurship things. Then I tried for 1 year. Naturally, it failed in 1.5 year. Then Atomberg happened, Manoj happened. Both of us knew each other, and then within Atomberg, again we're not very sure कि हम क्या करेंगे, right? So we started with one idea that failed, second idea that failed, third idea that failed. Eventually, in 2016 is where we got our first reasonably enough break, and within that, there are multiple failures. Now, if I try to analyze that, what really pushed me, and in the early years of entrepreneurship, or in the let's say in Atomberg, what it really pushed, I think what I really liked about entrepreneurship, which is true in day one, two, and today, is that in entrepreneurship you have the ability to solve a lot of problem, right? So you are intellectually always stimulated. आपको हमेशा कुछ ना कुछ चीजें यहाँ पे प्रॉब्लम हो रही है, वहाँ पे प्रॉब्लम हो रही है. You can always think of solving some problems here and there. So that one thing that I really really enjoyed, whether it's in my second year silk or anything, right? That was one. Second, there is no limit to the upside, and upside is not about only financial upside. The upside is about the impact that you want to create. The upside is about, I mean, in entrepreneurship, the good part is that you are limited by your vision. You're not limited by your job role or job designations or salaries or whatever it is, right? So upside is infinite, right? And I think these two things eventually kept me pushing for again and again and again and again. And the third thing I will say is what really matters is eventually, well, whatever we do, right? Whether you create a website, whether you do some business, at the end of the day, you always have this sense of creation or sense of achievements, right? So that these three things, I will say that, kept pushing me again and again. And I think over a period of time, after spending 7, 8, 9, 10 years of life in entrepreneurship, I see a clear struck difference of, let's say, how I think now and how I used to think back then. My perceptions around life, my perceptions around what issues we should not care about, and so overall, it has become a way of living, I will say, right? So yeah, I think that's about it. What really drove me in the first 3 years, and how it is pushing me now again and again.
Super. I think what clearly comes across is you're a very, very deep thinker. And of course, you've been executing as well. So I think it's a great combination. There's one point I want to double click before we move to the next one. You spent that period between 2008 to 2015, before you really got your first break, right? And it's a long period for someone who's as smart as you coming from IIT. And like you mentioned, there were jobs available, right? Like just from a monetary point of view, you could have been just better off in that initial period, right? But you were solving more for the upside later on, not just monetary, but all the other things that you also mentioned. And what do you think kept you going? Because a lot of times what happens is, and I'll tell you arguments that people will give, right? Some valid, some not so valid, is that I have family responsibilities, time is running out, or I'm tired, and things like that, right? Very early on in the journey itself. What kept you going?
Now, I think two, three things. Um, so first, you need to understand from the context perspective. We're just fresh graduate out of college. So your expenses are not much, right? So that way, financially, you are not that much burdened. Let's say if I choose to decide after 10 years of working. So that is the first context we need to first contextualize before getting into the answer. So financial burden was not much, but there was peer pressure, because eventually, if you're passing out from IIT, your friends are doing extremely great, right? Someone is earning 50 lakhs a year, 60 lakhs a year. It's very common back then, right? And you have to actually beg to them to even go for a beer drink, right? And in the 15 people, always the one who will not pay the bill. So एक दो साल अच्छा लगता है, but then eventually towards the end of 2014, 2015, I started realizing यार कि अब और कितना push करना पड़ेगा. So financial pressure, I will say that initial 1 2 years it never happened, but after second year towards the 2015, it definitely start picking in, and mostly the peer pressure that was there, and it was frustrating. It was not at all easy journey, right? But every time, we used to give up. We used to think to give up. Let's say, we actually came out with something else, right? Saying that, yeah, shayad, this is for example, let's say if I have one idea, we pursued it for some time, it didn't work out. But when it didn't work out, it didn't me and Manoj figure out, okay, let's try something else. And something else was ready at that point in time, right? There's always a hope that kept on pushing us, kept on pushing us, kept on pushing us. And it's not about me. I think the way Manoj also handled it, right? So it's amazing. Between both of us, we just did a, I think, great job of pushing it. And then the family support, saying that, care, even if you're from middle class background, they expected a lot from us, because eventually you send your kids to IIT to increase to ensure that the affluence of the family increases. But they were saying that, okay, don't ask or don't take money from us, but it's okay even if you don't give me money. That's the comfort that the family gave us. And I got extremely great friends who actually helped us to, who lent us 1 lakh, 2 lakh, 3 lakh rupees without any interest, anything, for the sake of helping us. That really helped us to push. I still remember in IIT Bombay, we used to have this canteen, Hostel 10, where we used to give dal khichdi for every month, right? So there, he used to give us credit. I will say the ecosystem supported us. I will not only give the entire credit to us, saying that we did this. Of course, there was a struggle, there was a things, but there was always a hope that pushed us, that helped us to take one more, give it 6 more months, give it 12 more months, and there was the financial expenses, which always either was mitigated through credit or mitigated through help from friends, and a zero pressure from my family of saying that I need to give something. But there's an inherent pressure of the peer group, the inherent pressure of people are doing well, and startups are getting funded right, left, center. The biggest pressure came in 2015, because 2015 is where the first boom happened, right? So like the days of housing and the tiny hall, that everyone is getting capital on presentation and the PPT, and people are saying that यार आप लोग कर क्या रहे हो, मतलब प्रोडक्ट बना रहे हो, इंजीनियरिंग करो, टेक करो, लोग यहाँ पे बैठ के बोल रहे हैं कि यार वो पीपीटी दिखा के people are investing, the Powai Valley is picking up, आप Powai में बैठे हो, nothing is happening. So that was a peer pressure that was very difficult to handle. But eventually, I think if I try to draw this from the and draw an inspiration from, let's say, and if I try to reflect it, let's say, or link it with my childhood, I will say that you know when you think something is right, just stick to it, right? The world will move. अब उस टाइम पे if I draw an analogy, I will say that कि यार जब जेई का डिसीजन हमने लिया था कि will not go to AI triple and go to focus on JEE. So if I draw an analogy saying that कि the society at this point in time is equivalent to, let's say, family, extended family at that point in time, and you want to take the decision that I'll only go engineering, product, etc., and stick by it. And eventually, if I look at now, the entire society has turned back saying that you did a great job by sticking to what you did, right? तो ये तो होता रहता है. That's how it is. So yeah.
Super. And I think what makes your journey even more interesting is that yours is almost like a David versus Goliath story, where the space that you're playing in, there are many large incumbents, right? And the sector has a reasonable high barrier to entry, and of course, some from a scale perspective as well, but especially from an entry point of view, right? So, what was your strategy to counter the intense competition, especially sort of early on?
Okay. So I will not say what was our strategy, but I will say what worked well for us. I can answer that looking back, right? I cannot
Yeah.
say what was our strategy in 2018, because 2018 you had like tens of strategies. You execute some, fail some, eventually double down on what is working out well for us, right? So I will not say strategy, but definitely what worked pretty well for us, right, is we played on our strength, right? And we always double down on our strength. Now, what is our strength? Our strength is not the balance sheet strength. We don't have capital. The large incumbents have capital. We do not have distribution. The large incumbents have distribution. We do not have brand. The large incumbents have brand. So naturally, you can't compete on these three. That is not your strength, right? But what we have is technology, which large incumbents at this space were definitely lacking. So we double down on that. We outspend them on manufacturing. We outspend them on innovation. We outspend them on technology in terms of building up the team, right? So back in 2018, 2019, whenever we raised capital, a significant chunk of the capital always went into strengthening our technology front. We invested a lot less in creating, let's say, the mid awareness, but focused a lot more on technology investment. In fact, if you look at our a simple example, I will just give you, right. For example, let's say offices. Right now, the office that I'm sitting today is the office that we actually built 3 months back. That is the corporate office. Our corporate office was the most ugly looking until 2024. But if you go to our R&D plan 2 years back, you will see that it is very lavish, right? So we ensured that we spent a lot there. Before R&D, we ensured the plant manufacturing is there, right? So we ensured that our capital utilization is to strengthen our strength and not the weakness. We spent on marketing a lot less and a lot later. So one is doubling on the strength. Now within strength, product and innovation was a clear strength for us. The second strength for us was that now what competition can't do, right, is the digital distribution. That was a new thing back in 2016. And we got early success in 2016 in e-commerce. We figured out that there's a lot of consumer who discover online, purchase offline. Now this is a common wisdom today, which was not a very easy accessed wisdom back in 2016. We figured that out in 2016 and just doubled down on that. We started building capabilities around digital distribution, never outsourced anything, did all of this is in-house, right? So we doubled down on that. Now, of course, distribution is not our strength, right? But founders going to market, core team members going to market is a strength that I can spend a lot of time on, which probably Havells CEO will not have enough time to spend on, right? That we did extremely well, right? Consumer centricity is our strength, which probably for a competition it's a process, but for us it's not a process. We can, if a retailer have a complaint, can I pick up the call and solve it in 10, 12 hours? The answer is yes. Can you think of, let's say, giving warranty free of replacement? The answer is yes, right? So I think even if I look at, so what worked well really for us is basically things that we could do and it is difficult for competition to do, right? And or if I, let's say, summarize and make it short, I will say that doubling down your strength and stop worrying about what competition strength or essentially your weakness is, right? If you do enough strength, you'll figure out you're building a complementary thing. So either you will do well and outperform them, or they will come and acquire you. There is no other possibilities. Only two possibilities are there.
Super. So even, when I've, as an investor, looked at consumer brands, there's a framework that I typically use to evaluate, right? Which is three things that I would look at. One is product innovation, the other is distribution, and the third is innovative marketing strategy, right? And ideally, any successful company is built on all three, or at least two of the three, right? And you not necessarily have to do everything together. But what you're saying is at least product innovation is what you guys started with, and then of course they worked on distribution, worked on marketing, etc. Let's talk about each of these in a little more detail and just beyond Atomberg as well, right? You talked about how you guys fueled your growth, through innovation. Of course, when you look at the broader consumer brand landscape in India today, uh, there's a lot of discussion around true product innovation, right? And I'll give you an example of a very famous brand called Mokobara, where there was a recent controversy that they were probably importing from China and things like that, right? And this is not to talk about Mokobara, but in general, how should one think about sort of brands and which have not really innovated on the product? Uh, what stops from them getting sort of disrupted, right?
So the assumption you are saying is that the product innovation is not there. Is that the assumption for
Yeah, yeah.
brands
I
you're
mean,
talking about?
in general, I'm not talking about them in particular, but I'm talking about in general. If you don't have product innovation, can you actually build a successful consumer brand just on the
Uh,
back of other two aspects?
you can. Um, not very easy to do. You can, but I will
Mm,
not say it's
mm,
impossible to do. Distribution is certainly a thing that you can think of building a brand. And even if, let's say, if we have product innovation, it alone cannot help us to build a brand, right?
mm,
So product innovation and distribution, brand, again, when people think about brand, they think about awareness, right? But that comes at a later stage. I will say it the best brand can be built if you have a product and distribution advantage. Now, distribution advantage does not mean you should have the largest distribution from day one. Distribution advantage means if you have a product, if it is selling through five different channels or 10 different geographies, is there any particular small niche that is where you can outperform the competition, right? So in our case, it was e-commerce. Nowadays, for many food brands, it is QCom, right? For some, it is in some specific territory. I mean, we have seen in our industry, people have built brand not going into digital way, but not going into q-commerce way, but actually building a brand focusing only in Kerala market, right? In today, not in the earlier days, right? So you need to identify a distribution for sure, and that is something that you cannot ignore.
mm,
Now, within that
mm, mm,
distribution, if you do not have a product innovation, then you'll have to have a price innovation, right? You'll have to solve something. And when I say price innovation, identifying the white space, either from channel perspective or from consumer perspective. But you have to solve something for that, right? And if you have none, if you do not have product or price, the only thing that you can do is where in categories where after sales matter, you'll have to think about that line, right? But for apparels or others, it doesn't matter. So you can't do much about
mm,
that as well, right? But
mm,
but having a Me Too brand and saying that, yeah, I will just trade from, let's say, a, a guy or a vendor and sell it to the market in a mass market, very difficult to make money out of it. You can get some revenue, but cannot get a real business built out of it, right? So you'll have to have some sort of this. Uh, But I think where brands, and I have seen by talking to again limited set of founders that I'm interacting with, um, they get too much, they take too much pressure of building the brand very fast.
Hmm.
राइट, वो उनको 5 साल में एकदम 1,000 करोड़ बनानी है, 2 साल में 1,000 करोड़ बनानी है, राइट? सो दैट इज नॉट हाउ यू बिल्ड अ ब्रांड. Some things take time. So, and for me to build a brand, spending on awareness is the last thing that you should do. Spending on awareness is something that you should do when your backbone is ready. And what do you mean by backbone is not always the product or manufacturing. Backbone is figuring out what your brand stands for. Let's say if your brand stands for service, for example, right? Let's say urban company stands for service, right? Now their backbone is ensuring that service may what they're promising is ensured. Now, why urban company did well and the others failed at some they started all the same time, right? It's that urban company over focused on their brand promise, which is the service promise. Others spent a lot on taking market share from urban company, right? Which eventually created some issues in the short term, but eventually long term they eventually won. So I always believe कि आप पहले backbone सही करो और backbone को identify करो आपका backbone है क्या, and that has to come from, and it's not only innovation or product or tech, right? You have to figure out is a mix of product, service, pricing, whatever it is, right? If it is costing is the backbone, ensure that the costing is the most affordable one. Let's say if costing is, I mean, Demand brand will be irrelevant if their cost is higher than QCom, right? So today if let's say Q-commerce price सस्ता है DMart से, तो आप DMart नहीं जाओगे. Doesn't matter how large the DMart brand is. But if they figured out to stay competitive in the long term, sustainable manner from let's say QCom, they will have their own journey. You can't take away that proposition.
It's the point around you mentioned around strength itself, right? Like, how do you double down on that? I think partly also what you're sort of alluding to here. Tell me one thing, even from a, and this is something, I think about, right? Like from a, as again, as an investor, when I think about brands, is ultimately even from a product innovation point of view, unless you have a patent, and that also is sort of, one can argue how much you can sort of, protect against that. But others also follow suit, right? How do you address when, let's say, I think in your case also, while you guys started with BLDC, there are others who followed suit. Of course, you guys built a strong brand by then, and people associated that BLDC fan with Atomberg, right? But when competition copies your product, how do you address it from that standpoint then?
Very interesting. I think patent is something that one should not care much about. In most of the categories, unless it is very very protected, maybe in medical science or some areas. So clearly, if you're building a brand saying that you will, or building an innovation engine saying that patent will help you, I think you are just like fooling yourself. So now, what is then you should thrive for, what should aim for? When you think about an innovative product, the dimension that people miss is the time. आज 2024 में एटमबर्ग का ये प्रोडक्ट इनोवेटिव है. 2025 में maybe it will not be innovative because someone else will come, right? So the question is, when you think about innovation, think about, can you build capabilities to launch things faster than the rest of the world, right? If you could solve for that, that means any given point in time you'll have some part of the portfolio which is innovative, and that helps you to maintain the brand positioning, right? And that helps you to stand aside of the consumers. And that happened with Atomberg when the competition came. So 2016, BLDC was innovative, and we're not the first one. There are three more companies at that point in time, right? And we all had the same product. Now, so the company that launched BLDC before Atomberg was the most innovative in 2015 in that space. In 2016, Atomberg came, so we became parity, right? Or maybe we did some better than some job in better than them. What really helped us in 2017, we launched something which they couldn't launch in 4 years. In 2018, we even further upgraded. 2019 further. So 2020, when the competition came, today, if I look at, and if I take in competition's BLDC portfolio and our BLDC portfolio, they are mostly taking inspiration from what we launched last year. But what we launch next year will be different from what we launched this year, right? And that is how you have to think about innovation. Now, to think about now what will drive this, right? What will drive that speediness, right? Is it the ecosystem, the manufacturer ecosystem, the supplier ecosystem? the team ecosystem, the agility that you build in the process, right? How fast you can get the consumer interest and back to the, so from the common thing of saying that, mind to market, right? So दिमाग में कुछ आया, कितना फास्ट आप मार्केट में करते हो और कितना सही से करते हो, right? What is the hit rate ratio? So that is what helps you to stay ahead of the curve, and not saying that, so BLTC आज भी मार्केट में बहुत है, right? और EV मार्केट में बहुत होंगे, but there is still a difference between Ola and Ather and the worst of the world, right? तो वो जेनरिक किसी का राइट हो ही नहीं सकता कि मेरा BLTC में राइट है, बट BLTC में टेक्निकली प्रोडक्ट वाइज कैन आई बी ऑलवेज सुपीरियर, मे बी यस, राइट? That's how it happened. I think that's what I should go say for.
Interesting. So it's about basically continuous product innovation. It's not like you've done once, you can rest on it. You have to keep evolving and continue to be better, and launch
It's
new
a
things. And
treadmill,
like,
and any
yeah.
any and every business is a treadmill. Yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned about manufacturing, right? And you gave that example in 2015. I would say while things have changed from 2015 to now, where a lot more founders are sort of talking about manufacturing, but it's still one of those sectors which people, still feel very shy of because it's very tough. It's very tough, right? And what has been your big learnings on the manufacturing front in sort of setting it up? Both in terms of just the capital required, working with a very different set of people, and so all other sort of challenges, right?
I remember, I mean, talking about manufacturing, talking about 2015 was not good. I remember a call that I had in 2015 with an investor, very famous investor fund. I called them and said that, we have our own manufacturing. The moment I said we have the own manufacturing, he just cut the call. So from there to now, at least people are saying, at least you are starting your own manufacturing focused fund, etc. So I'm very happy the
Yeah.
way the overall ecosystem has moved in this direction. Now, coming to the second point, manufacturing is tough or distribution is tough. I think it's tough till the time you try, right? So it's all about trying it once and figuring out things. I mean, people are smart, right? People figure out the ways to figuring things out, right? I mean, if you talk about a founder nowadays, they will say, no, offline distribution is tough, but now people have started saying that क्या offline distribution, we have figured out some way. कुछ किसी ने EBO crack कर लिया, किसी ने थोड़ा बहुत GT crack कर लिया, right? They have some playbooks to play around. So manufacturing is similar here. People are figuring out. People have figured out. Our learning around manufacturing is देखो कुछ ऐसा, I don't know what do you want to hear, like what is the best
Like
practice in manufacturing? Is that the question that you want to ask?
I'll give you an example, right? Like I was at a textile plant yesterday,
Hmm.
in near Gurgaon, right? Now when I was
Ah.
seeing that plant, like what it takes for you to work inside that plant, be it as an owner, be it as an employee, is very different compared to when you go and sit in an office. And I'm not saying that that is easy, but I think just the sheer physicality of it, of being in that, this cotton flying over, वहां पे आप मास्क पहने हुए हो, वहां पे वो इतना साउंड हो रहा था उस जगह पे कि आपको एक दूसरे की आवाज भी नहीं सुनाई देगी, राइट? एंड देयर आर पीपल हु आर वर्किंग कंटिन्यूअसली, एक फुल डे आप वहां पे काम कर रहे हो. सो एज इवन एज यू आर द फाउंडर और समवन सीनियर, आप वो सिर्फ ऑफिस में नहीं बैठ सकते, आपको जाके वहां प्लांट में काम करना है, उसको ऑप्टिमाइज करना है, उसकी एफिशिएंसी बढ़ानी है. All those things are very different compared to, when you are, of course, I'm not again saying that anything else is easy, but it is just a very different skill set, very different tenacity, I think, that is required. आपको अपने घर से वहां जाने में 1.5-2 घंटा लग जाता है. Whereas अगर आप नॉर्मल अपने कोई ऑफिस जाएंगे तो शायद आधी पौन घंटे में पहुंच जाएंगे. So your travel times are very different. The kind of people you work with are very, very different, right? Because unlike in a, let's say, corporate setup, you'll obviously interact with a lot of blue collar workforce, which have very different considerations, in terms of how they make decisions in life, right? And how do you manage them? There is that land acquisition. अगर आपको वो करना है, government authority से deal करनी है, man, it's a completely different ecosystem at all levels, right?
Right, right, right. No, yeah, of course. I mean, certainly, I will say that the tasks are different than what you usually, imagine in a white collar job, or the kind of things, right? And and at the end of the day, someone will have to enjoy manufacturing, right? And let's say you have three, four co-founders. Someone has to enjoy that part. So in our case, Manoj was extremely, extremely passionate about, building manufacturing, etc. Right. And the same thing. Let's say if you go to a market, right? on the distribution side, say, in general trades. Very easy to think about, staying in office, thinking about how to crack digital. But if you, let's say, have to visit market like a sales team every day in the hot sun, it's not that fancy. But if you are inspired and enjoy the interactions, if you think that at the end of the tunnel there is an positive outcome possibility, you will still do that input activities, right? And you will still feel like, okay, I've achieved something out of it. It's tough, but I've achieved something out of it, right? I can't ask the manufacturing guy to spend a lot of time in the market and he will not enjoy it, right? The same thing, the marketing, and but the both the work is equally tough, right? At the end of the tunnel, you achieve something by visiting market, you achieve something by visiting manufacturing plants. Is that inspiring enough for you? The answer is yes, it is for you, right? Now, as a founder, I think eventually whatever, make sure that helps you to build that purpose, whatever you have started with. If you want to start to build a consumer brand or whatever it is, right? If you think that मैन्युफैक्चरिंग करके ही आपका कॉस्ट कम हो सकता है और आपको अगर क्लैरिटी है कि वो चीज़ है, तो आपको एक दो दिन बुरा लगेगा, तीसरा दिन आपको यू स्टार्ट एंजॉइंग दैट पार्ट, राइट? सो आई थिंक हार्डनेस का ओवरकम करने का तरीका है. बट वेयर आई विल से दैट वन लर्निंग दैट यू हैव सीन इज दैट कि जैसे सबको थोड़े पैसे आते जाती है, राइट? डोंट स्टार्ट वर्किंग लाइक एनी अदर कंपनी. जैसे इफ आई एम थिंक, सो आई थिंक इन मैन्युफैक्चरिंग में क्या है ना कि China has done a lot of good job, right? In across industries. Korea have done a good job, right? So whenever an opportunity, try to learn from them and try to benchmark that, and do not benchmark another similar company, let's say in India or in other country, right? Where they're also learning. We should always think of learning from the best, right? And in the case of manufacturing, the best is the Chinese guy or the Korean guys, right? So figure out ways to how. So we have learned a lot. So we actually had a team stationed in China very early in our life. Right? We built a very strong ecosystem in China, not for taking products from them. That is not. I mean, we don't have more than 2-3% to 4% import from China, but we have a full-fledged team. We understand how they manufacture tool, how they manufacture everything, right? Processes, systems, and everything. So that is very important. I will say, for if you really want to scale on manufacturing.
Makes sense. And you know what you mentioned was a good segue to one of the points I also wanted to talk about is the macro environment for manufacturing, right? Given the whole, I mean, post-COVID, I think we've been seeing one supply chain disruption after the other, right? First it was COVID, then it was the wars, and now it is, of course, the trade related tariffs and everything else, right? How do you approach, you mentioned China, of course, you have very little dependency, but how did you approach dependency for a few of your products on other countries, and how does one sort of solve for it, right? Because especially for many components, I've heard like they are not even manufactured in India, right, today. So then how do you solve for some of these issues?
नहीं, आप हर चीज को तो देखो डे वन पे आप सॉल्व नहीं कर पाओगे, राइट? सो देयर विल ऑलवेज बी अ जर्नी एंड वी हैव डन दिस. आई मीन, let's say if we used to import something from China in 2017, whether it is some component, over a period of time we figure out, is there a better way we can do localizations, right? So we've done this. So let's say we have, used to import, let's say, exhaust fan from there, even if the technology was our, but eventually the end assembly has to happen there. But then we localized in 2020, right? So you have to have this mindset of localizations. You have to have the mindset of costing, and whenever the right opportunity comes, the right resources come, you think about it, right? And that is where you have to think about how do you want to build the brand, because you'll always be constrained on resource allocation. आपको इनफाइनाइट पैसे आप सब चीज करोगे, पर अगर आपके पास 100 रुपए है और 100 रुपए में आपको डिसीजन लेना है कि आपको ब्रांड अवेयरनेस में 50 डालना है कि 50 में से 30 रुपए आपको मैन्युफैक्चरिंग में डालना है, राइट? सो ऑलवेज हैज टू एन एलोकेशन फॉर मैन्युफैक्चरिंग एंड प्रोडक्ट हाई. So, for example, as a percentage of revenue, our marketing spend is probably 7-8%, right? But for most of the brands in the early years, the marketing spend is 15-20 or maybe above that. We never did that. We always stayed below 10%. But in manufacturing and product, if you look at R&D spend, still today at a thousands crore scale, our R&D spend is more than 4% of our revenue. Right? Or let's the manufacturing spend is even more. Right? So it's a choice of allocations, and our philosophy has been strengthen the backbone first. If the backbone is strong, front end will figure out its own way to bet. But strengthening backbone needs time and it needs patience. And that is why I was saying the very beginning that nowadays people are in a rush to build a brand very fast. Right? So Atomberg until 2020, no one knew, right? But Atomberg people knew in last 2 3 years. But it happened in last 2 3 years. A lot of work has gone in the first 8 years. So you have to think like in a long term perspective and start building around it.
Interesting. And let's talk a little bit about, moving from manufacturing to on the marketing side, where of course you guys have again, with what you're saying is relatively lesser spends than, what otherwise people would do, done a good job in terms of scaling the brand. Let's start first with the online part of it, right? And for especially for younger brands, online becomes that channel, especially quick commerce now, to scale up. But one of those things which, I think everyone is realizing while you're getting scale, it's not a channel where you can easily be profitable right now, right? How should one sort of, think about it?
From day one, you have to think about omnichannel. There is not a single brand can be built on a single channel or a single small geography, right? So brand from day one has to have a mindset of saying that here long term में तो मुझे have to have presence in across channels. The faster you do, the better it is. And this is one of the best decisions we took in 2018. Because 2018 tak, I still remember we said no to an investor because they were pushing us to focus only on building online channels and getting, let's say, 10 categories in online channels versus one category in all channels, right? So, and we decided to focus on one channel and in multiple categories. And despite high valuation offered, we didn't say no to them, right? And that is what we stood by it. So I think the brand has to think about omnichannel. There is no right reason. Now, I'll give you a simple example. Yesterday, not yesterday, I would say last week, I discovered a drink called Ocean, some lychee Ocean brand. I don't know if I forgot the exact name. A very good drink actually, and and I was introduced to it by an uncle who ordered it from quick commerce, right? And and when I was visiting a pharmacy to buy a medicine for my kid, I actually saw that drink in the fridge and I bought it there, right? Now, how will you attribute this consumer and profitability, right? अब आपने मुझ पे कितना खर्चा किया है, कैसे एट्रीब्यूट करोगे? पॉसिबल ही नहीं एट्रीब्यूट करना, राइट? आप क्या मैं क्विक कॉमर्स को देखूं प्रॉफिटेबली, क्या मैं ऑफलाइन में देखूं? तो ओवरऑल यू विल हैव टू थिंक अबाउट बिल्डिंग द ब्रांड इन द omni channel mindset. Any channel will give you some right to place the product, get some market share, leverage this and take an other channel. अगर क्विक कॉमर्स में लग रहा है कि आपको थोड़ा बहुत मिला है, go to offline, figure out within offline is the pharmacy that you want to crack out or something else you want to crack out, build that, right? So I think no way that any brand can be profitable thinking about one channel and spending. आज अगर मैं पूरा ई कॉमर्स बंद कर दूं और ओनली सिर्फ ऑफलाइन ऑफलाइन को एट्रीब्यूट करूं, आई विल बी अनप्रॉफिटेबल. If I think only about e-commerce and attribute 100% of my marketing spend to e-commerce, including ATL, I'll be again non-profitable, right? So, but if I do combined, it's profitable, right? Now, possible to attribute, very difficult. Is that capability? Yes, and that is what you need to keep on building on. So I think ये मतलब ये reality है, omni channel है, you can't hide from there.
Got it. Interesting. And let's talk about the third pillar, between product innovation, sort of distribution, and then sort of marketing, right? What worked for you guys? Of course, over time, as you guys scaled, you did TV ads. Any learnings from that? But for a younger company, especially when you don't have enough resources, how should one sort of think about brand building?
No, I think the brand building starts from very beginning, and as I said, brand building is first figuring out what your brand stands for, right? And what your brand stands for is not a theoretical exercise that you will do as a part of the brand guidelines. What your brand stands for is nothing but figuring out, is it the product, is the distribution, is the service that it stands for, right? And that you start building. So brand building starts happening in 2012 in Atomberg, right? When it is decided that we will be known for engineering, we'll be known for innovation. When got in 2016, we decided we will be known for our service. We over invested on service, for example, right? So, for example, in service, we ensured that others gave warranty of 1 year, we gave warranty of 3 years. Others gave replacement, zero replacement, we gave immediate replacement. We spent a lot more on service than any other brands could have spent, right? But we reduced the spend on marketing. So we figured out those areas of things. We figured out that our brand में सबसे important है trust. For example, in our case, then we figured out what is our strength. Our strength is saying that engineering. Now, can engineering and IIT Bombay is related? The answer is yes. Engineering and IIT Bombay is related. Now, can you then talk about that? So one of the brand pillar in the early days was actually saying that this product made by IIT Bombay founders, right? Now this is irrelevant today. It's completely out of the brand pillars, but it was a very strong brand pillar until 2018, and that became a story saying that yeah, retail mein and everywhere that fan industry mein some IIT people have done something technologically. Let's give them opportunity, right? So figure those brand pillars, the brand strengths, what the brand stands for. Coming to what you're largely talking about is the brand awareness. Now, how do you aware the consumer about the brand, right? In day one, it's a wish, but you cannot have that wish to spend a lot on awareness. That is not going to happen unless you're very well funded, very well backed capital. But I'm assuming that's not the most of the cases, so let's not talk about that particular thing. But if you're a normal startup founders building your brand, it's impossible to have a lot of capital spent for this. So you'll have to think about on day one conversions. So the first metric that you should look for is कि कितने consumer आपका product ले रहा है. अब उसके लिए आपको ई कॉमर्स में जाके परफॉर्मेंस मार्केटिंग करना है, उसके लिए आपको क्विक कॉमर्स में खर्चा करना है, या फिर आपका अपैरल ब्रांड जो डिजाइन में बिकते हैं इंस्टाग्राम में स्पेंड करना है, या फिर उसके लिए आपको एक स्पेसिफिक 10 या 50 काउंटर ढूंढने हैं जो अच्छे बेचते हैं और उसको ओवर मार्जिन देना है, राइट? And you have to figure out what is the most economically profitable channel. And you have to get that initial set of 100,000, 2,000, 10,000 consumer through that route. And if the product is good, if the brand stands for is uniquely differentiated and distinguished, and you can communicate well through that medium, people will eventually go for and repeat orders and word of mouth. That will spread. There will be natural traction if the product market fit, right? And that those signaling you'll have to identify as you scale and then start spending on things, right? Otherwise, spending too early is too dangerous, I will say. So wait, give it enough time. And again, all this boils down to saying that do you have enough patience? If you raise capital too early, you'll lose out of patience because there's an investor pressure to immediately begin, right? So we have to balance. So I think a lot of brand fails and a lot of company fails just because of this pressure. If you have enough, grow when you grow, but when the backbone is ready, right? So that is what I think my suggestion on the brand building is. So focus on what the brand stands for, identify those things, identify the niche channels, niche geographies, get to revenue, get to some consumers home, let them love the product, do very strong focus on NPS, improve it over a period of time. Whatever money you generate from there, reinvest into the brand building, right? And today, let's say the brand building is spreading awareness. So about our content, influencer marketing, and that is a very obvious things to do, right? And as you scale, to always identify that what is the problem that your brand want to solve for. For example, in 2019, we figured out that we have become a decent scale size, 50 crore के brand बन गए, 100 crore के brand, 100 crore brand बन गए थे back then. But then realize कि यार अभी भी लोगों को ट्रस्ट नहीं आ रहा है. वो आईटी बॉम्बे का ट्रस्ट जो था वो 0 to 1 पे ठीक था, बट अब उसके बियॉन्ड वो ट्रस्ट नहीं आ पा रहा है. Then you figure out how do you solve for trust, and for the only for to solve for trust is saying that can we be the cricket sponsor, right? So, but if my job to done was, let's say, to get conversion, then cricket sponsoring is not the right answer. Right? So you'll have to have that clarities as we go into that brand building exercise. But initial 2 3 years is very simple. अच्छा प्रोडक्ट ही चाहिए होगा, कोई और ऑप्शन है नहीं. अच्छा अच्छा सर्विस चाहिए होगा, या फिर कुछ अच्छा प्राइस पॉइंट चाहिए होगा, and that will be just hold as much as we can.
Basically, you have to get the basics right, the basic value prop for why the customer is coming to you. And the other part, what you're saying is, of course, it takes time. And I want to touch upon that one quick question. Is on the investor bit, right? You mentioned a few times about your different investor interactions. A young startup founder going and telling the investor that it's going to take time. Any which ways with whatever is being happening in the public markets with the returns, people have lost patience, right? Especially investors. Everyone wants quick returns. How does a founder actually like? How do you find that right investor for you? What was that journey like for you, and how should founders think about it? It's not easy, right? A lot of times you don't even have an option, in spite of having done a good job in
Yeah, it's
building
coming to
out the
that.
product or getting early traction. It's not always easy.
No, fair. I think before commenting on what a founder should do, let me probably give you examples of what we did. And you're very correct. This only holds true for founders who has an option to choose from. You need capital. There is no option. There is no choice, right? We have to take the capital to survive and just do that. Even if it comes from, let's say, a typical traditional investor, there is no choice that you have. Um, and that is one thing that, of course, having choice or not choice. Second thing is that a lot of time I see, people start distinguishing between an investor and the founder, right? And I think in my view, it is eventually both of us are working for a third party called company, right? Both of us are shareholder. X percentage, maybe my shareholding is slightly higher, investors will be lower, maybe runtime is higher and lower. But eventually, both of us have a common goal to ensure that the company survives for as many years as possible, right? So naturally, it can't be very different interest for both of us. Uh, might have a different exit period, but initial 5 6 years of exit period में आप ये कभी नहीं चाहोगे ना कि कंपनी खराब करे. That will never you will want, right? So I don't think you should approach of saying that यार ये investors है तो इसको ऐसे deal करो, ये बताओ वो मत बताओ and all this stuff, right? So I don't operate with that mindset. I always operate with the mindset saying that we are on the same board. Whatever has happened transparently, and you can validate this from talking to all investors. I'll be the first one to take negative news to the investor saying that yeah, we have failed on this aspects, right? अब जो करना आप कर लो, but जो reality है, right? So we have built that trust over a period of time, and it is not easy. Yeah? Build that trust, but that transparency has been built in the last 8 9 years, right? So today the trust is so much that if I say that I will do X today, they will never justify saying that कि इसका मतलब variables क्या है and all that stuff, right? Now that trust has been built. So that is the second thing I will say. If we operate with the mindset of saying that the company is something that is equal for both of us, we must operate with the mindset of working together. Now coming to the choices that we made, right? So we raised multiple rounds. The first 1 crore we raised, we didn't have any choice. We got to an angel investor. He gave 1 crore. We loved them. Got lucky. Both of us had extremely great relationship. The next time we raised capital in 2016, our first 6 crore, right? We raised from an unknown fund by an unknown promoter. So in Flexo, maybe most of the people don't even know. It was known as Parampara back then. Uh, the fund managers were not from the industry. They're from actually they're one of the both of them are like bankers. They actually started funds, not known to industry. Uh, we were their probably first or second bet that they have taken, right? They offered us 6 crore, and by the time they offered, towards the end, we got another offer without naming the name, but there's a very large, famous brand globally, not only in India. They offered almost 30% higher valuation. And when they gave 30% higher valuation, right? And we had a choice now to make. Should I go with the first fund, not known nothing? The second fund, very global, known, higher valuation. We chose the first one, right, in 2016, and that was a most surprising decision. That even the first fund kept coming and telling us saying that आपने पता नहीं कैसे मुझे choose किया. And in my head, in our head, is very simple because of two reasons. One reason, in fact, and that was that we figured out that the first investors has a lot of patience in building this company. The second investor, which is very well known, didn't have the patience, right? And we wanted to have the patience because we are still figuring out. उस time हम B रहे थे, B2C हम गए ही नहीं थे. And the second investor wanted to focus on B2C on day one. We're saying कि हम B2C करेंगे, but we want to ensure that the business survive for 30 years. And that was the thought process difference. So we took a cut on the valuation and figured it out. The same thing happened in 2017 when we wanted to raise for Series A round, right? And again, we tried all investors. It took 18 months for us to get capital. Everyone said no. It was extremely tough time. Probably we were supposed to start the business for many years, many times. एंड जब हम लोग ऑलमोस्ट डिसाइड कर लिए थे कि यार कंपनी हम बंद करेंगे क्योंकि कोई इन्वेस्टर है ही नहीं, इंडिया में कोई इन्वेस्टर बचा ही नहीं है कि वी नॉट अप्रोच, वी हैव गॉन टू लाइक प्रोबब्ली 5 or 4 आईसीज, एंड वो 4 आईसी से वी हैव गॉन रिजेक्टेड. मतलब इजीली आईसी से मोस्टली 3 out of 10 गेट और मे बी 2 out of 10 गेट रिजेक्टेड, बट वी लाइक 4 out of 4 वी गॉट रिजेक्टेड, राइट? सो कि यार अब कुछ नहीं हो सकता. फिर हमें एक चाइनीज इन्वेस्टर मिला, Xiaomi, बिकॉज दे हैव सीन दैट इन इंडिया इन चाइना, सो दे बेटेड अस. हमें सब अच्छा लगा. बाय द टाइम इट हैपेंड, जस्ट उसी टाइम पे एंटी चाइना सेंटीमेंट आ गया, दे स्टॉप्ड रिस्पॉन्डिंग, राइट? तो वो भी चला गया. बट व्हेन डिसाइडेड कि अब कुछ नहीं हो सकता, इंडिया में कुछ नहीं, चाइना में कुछ नहीं है, we saw a message on link, on WhatsApp, on paper saying that यार X people started in 91, right? We just reached out to them saying that यार कोई भरोसा ही नहीं था कि हो जाएगा. This is a famous thing between N and us also. And I wrote to him LinkedIn, he responded, we met very fast. Within 15 days we got the offer. When we got the offer, within 7 days we got 3 more offers, right? तो 1.5 साल से किसी को conviction नहीं था, and 7 दिन में 4 ऑफर आ गए, and the valuation like kept jumping up, right? Like मतलब 7 दिन पहले कंपनी बंद होने वाला था, और 7 दिन बाद the valuation like double than what our expectation was, right? And we eventually decided saying that, yeah, no, God, we'll go with N91, and others we have not said no to it, even if the valuation are like as high as 25% more than what N91 offered, right? So now talking from this, and then we have like Temasek last time, it's a very clean round, and again we have to say no to few, but purely like this, right? Now, from this, I think if I think about from founders, if you have a choice, right, you have 3 4 parameters to think about. One, of course, is the valuation and the price. That is one commercial aspects of it. The second is not the fund, but the fund manager. That is more important to you, right? Who will come on your board? How interact? How what is the vibe that you're matching, right? थर्ड इज सेइंग दैट एंड डिस्कशन में यार आपका स्ट्रेटेजी मैच हो रहा है कि नहीं हो रहा है, आप कितना उस इन्वेस्टर्स को ऑनबोर्ड करने के लिए आपको कितना आपको स्टोरी बनानी पड़ रही है, राइट? सो लेट्स से इफ यू आर क्रिएटिंग लॉट ऑफ स्टोरीज टू impress the investor, that means something is not right from day one. It's unhealthy, you're not transferring the saying race, right? The second aspect of it, right? Similarly, this is the third aspect of it, saying that here now the return profile is very important. Now, if you let's say look at last year, if you think that आपके 4 5 साल में आपको आप 3x 4x बन सकते हो, and if you target an investor who is 10x expectation, then वो तो mismatch होगा ही ना कि आप day one पे 10x promise करके ला रहे हो, आपको पता है कि 3x 4x ही करोगे. You figure out the investor will be right for 3 4x, right? So I think these few things are there, but again, it all depends on the choices that you want that you have. Fortunately, we had the choices, but we never prioritized the first point, which is the valuation, which has been important. We negotiated, we got to a point, but that's there. We didn't go beyond that.
It's very good to my ears to sort of hear that because I hardly hear a founder, speaking that language. But it's something that basis my years, and I've spent what 13, 14 years now investing, is one of those things I say to a founder, boss, forget about valuation. You should first align with the investor, and if you think he's the best investor, then go ahead, and valuation in that sense is secondary because you'll realize in the long run it won't, make a big difference to anyone. I'll wrap up with one final question on the macro, right? There is, of course, a lot of activity which is happening on the consumer electronic side, right? There's a lot of assembly that is happening with Apple, Tata, etc., and there's a lot of focus on semiconductors and more, right? What do you think is the broader opportunity in this segment that entrepreneurs should sort of focus on? And what is it that those 2 3 areas where you think there's support needed from the government as well? Beyond what already might be happening to further sort of this cause?
Okay. Um, Manufacturing as a sector in India is a extremely positive sector, and I think the tailwind is going to stay for very long time. Now, so I think to figure out what is the right play of manufacturing sector, I think the two things that matters. One is identifying government focus and aligning with that, right? So let's say if electronics is government focus, figure out within electronics what is the great focus to be. Now, if electronics is government focused, the way that they operate is, day one they will give subsidy, etc., to let's say have the basics in place, assemblies, etc., in place. Then let's say they will ask कि आप अभी इसका backend भी इंडिया में चालू करो. They will say कि यार इतना component इंडिया से होना चाहिए, इतना mix इंडिया से होना चाहिए, इतना चीज यहाँ से होना चाहिए, right? And slowly they'll start increasing strengthening the reason. Now, depending on sector that you choose, I will figure out in which journey you are, right? If a very early journey, let's say आज solar में बहुत push है, for example, right? Or let's say if it was 2016, electronics was a big push, right? 2016, वहाँ पे आप एक EMS line भी डाल दोगे तो भी आपका business हो जाएगा because it is trailing industry. Today, if you want to build something in electronics, डाल के कुछ नहीं होगा. ये में commodity industry. But if you think what they want electronics के beyond, can you add some engineering designs, value engineering designs? So you go one step deeper. In our sector, what we have done, let's say in last year, is that we built another subsidiary for focusing on leveraging the manufacturing strength that we have and aligning with what the government or India's push is, right? And then we figured out that in our industry, air conditioner is something that India wanted to focus on. Now, within air conditioner, the first thing was to have a lot of PLI scheme to saying that air conditioner के जो भी part वगैरह है उसको localize करना चालू करो. Now they've started saying that कि अब इतना तो आपने कर लिया, प्लास्टिक वगैरह कर लिया, now focus on compressor, which is one level deeper, right? And now we focus on saying compressor one level deep tech, our strength is tech, can we merge that? Can we merge the motor, right? So again, figuring out your strength, government interest, and everything has to be aligned. Just opening a manufacturing setup out of nowhere is not going to work with you. And when you start a manufacturing setup, Do not start saying that कि यार ये गवर्नमेंट सब्सिडी है, इसके बेसिस पे आई विल सर्वाइव. It's not going to work. It will give you a right to play, but not right to win in the long term. Right to win has to have a mindset saying that कि आज अगर चाइना इस प्राइस में दुनिया में बेच रहा है, मुझे कितना टाइम लगेगा और कितना इन्वेस्टमेंट लगेगा टू बीट दैट. If that you operate with that mindset, you will either do achieve that or you will do better than rest of the Indian players. सिर्फ सब्सिडी को बेस करके अगर मैन्युफैक्चरिंग बनाओगे तो कुछ नहीं हो सकता. So I think a mix of all of these is where I think the industry lies.
Makes sense. And any suggestions on what more at a macro level, policy level, one should think about, government should think about?
देखो, I think one good part is that in last 8-10 years, a lot of good thing has happened in manufacturing, right? Whether it is, for example, simple things like NAPS policy, the NATS policy, but we have leveraged it a lot. It has helped reduce the cost of manpower. A lot of visits to our plant by authorities have reduced significantly. There's a positive mindset of, for example, if we closed a plant, we closed the Nerul plant and moved to Chakan plant, right? And when we did our groundwork, we figured out that India में 5 साल लगते हैं plant बंद करने में. We did it in 6 months, right? It can be very Maharashtra specific experiment, Chakan. I say a lot of positive has happened, so I will certainly not argue on that. Great job overall. Um, if you ask me to change or suggestions, I'll probably have like two, three very specific things in mind. And I can tell you the two things because I just spoke with someone yesterday from government on these 3 points. I just want to repeat it here also. So one I will say is the working hour of blue collar people. So in the labor laws, there can be some simplification of that. Current shift of saying 8 hours each shift for running 3 shift is not only about that cost of manpower but also the overhead expenses and everything. It becomes slightly more expensive, and I think there can be slightly better way of figuring out balancing the right work culture there, of the right comfort and everything. But 8 hours three shift with all the overhead expenses is very difficult and expensive. There is some opportunity there for sure. The second I will say is very simple thing, right? For example, when you think about manufacturing subsidy, there's a central subsidy, there's a state subsidy. Now, most of the central subsidy में क्या होता है कि आपको कैपेक्स तभी जो भी पैसा आप डाल रहे हो वो तभी मिलता है सब्सिडी जब आपका if the only the date of spend or date of investment is post date of approval. Now imagine we've started a plant. Now we'll have to wait for the approval to invest capex. Otherwise, I'll not get the subsidy on that capex invested. In state, it is different, right? In state, it is within that year or after date of approval, date of application, sir. So that will speed up the process of innovation. Otherwise, you'll have to wait for some time to get that thing. It's a very small thing, but it will definitely add on the ease of innovation speed doing. Third thing I will say is अभी क्या हो रहा है कि you only have two choices. Either you are in Factory Act or you are in Shop and Establishment Act, right? और अब जैसे जैसे मैन्युफैक्चरिंग बढ़ता हुआ जा रहा है, there is a third concept coming up, let's say an innovation center. Innovation center is nothing but let's say capability center. But अभी कहते हैं कि आपको हार्डवेयर में प्रोडक्ट में कुछ करना है कैपेबिलिटी सेंटर, तो आपको इनोवेशन में सिर्फ व्हाइट कॉलर सेटअप नहीं होगा, आपके यहाँ पे एक लैब भी होगा, एक छोटा सा लेथ मशीन भी होगा, मे बी वेरी स्मॉल स्केल, मे बी सिर्फ 10 ही लोग काम कर रहे होंगे, राइट? बट बिकॉज यू हैव दैट स्मॉल सेटअप विल फॉल अंडर फैक्ट्री एक्ट. A factory acme problem is people cannot work beyond 7 p.m. The woman cannot work beyond 7 p.m. You'll have to take care of their logistics and everything, right? Now, I think some of these are gray area, right? Now, can we bypass? The answer is yes, no, I don't know. But is there an opportunity as we're focusing on manufacturing and innovation in manufacturing? Is there an opportunity of have a hybrid of shop and factory? The answer is yes. Or tweaking for some sort of, right? So I think these two, three things is just top of my mind. There is, of course, a lot more which we can talk about, but some of these are just top of my mind.
Super. This is excellent. And of course, we've covered a wide range of areas, right from manufacturing to marketing to distribution to overall macro as well. Thank you, Shibam, for sharing all of this. I'm sure everyone will find it really useful to learn from your experience. Really appreciate it.
No, thank you so much. Really enjoy the conversation, Sarvesh, and all the very best for your fund.
Super, super. Thank you.